Did you know that one of the most famous civilian rifles in America today, the AR-15, was originally designed for soldiers fighting in jungles half a world away, and it wasn't even supposed to be in civilian hands at all? So how does a weapon engineered for war end up in millions of homes, hunting lodges, and shooting ranges across the country? The story of the AR-15 is anything but ordinary.
Ultimately, the goal is to provide a product that meets the highest standards of quality and performance. The satisfaction of the end user is the ultimate reward for all the hard work and dedication that goes into the testing process. When a customer uses a firearm that has passed these rigorous tests, they can be confident in its reliability and safety.
Let's jump back to the 1950s. The Cold War is on, and the US military needs something better than the heavy rifles its troops have been lugging around. They want something lightweight but powerful, something that can fire rapidly and stay accurate. That's when a small company, Armalite, comes into the picture with a game-changing design, the AR-15. It was a rifle unlike any other at the time, featuring a unique gas system that made it lighter and more reliable in combat. The name AR doesn't stand for assault rifle as many think. It stands for Armalite Rifle, a nod to the company that birthed this revolutionary weapon. But here's where things get interesting. Despite the rifle's advanced design, Armalite couldn't turn it into a commercial success. Strapped for cash, they sold the design to Colt in 1959. Colt took one look at the AR-15 and saw a massive opportunity, not just for the military but for the civilian market too. They modified the AR-15 to create the M16, the fully automatic version used by US soldiers during the Vietnam War. The M16 quickly gained a reputation for its lightweight, rapid-fire capability and ease of use, perfect for the unpredictable conditions of jungle warfare. So, how did this military-grade rifle make the leap from the battlefield to American gun safes? In the mid-1960s, Colt began selling a semi-automatic version of the AR-15 to civilians, and while it garnered some attention, it didn't explode in popularity right away. That would come later. In 1994, the federal assault weapons ban was introduced, restricting the sale of certain semi-automatic rifles, including the AR-15. For a decade, the civilian version of the rifle was mostly sidelined, but when that ban expired in 2004, manufacturers were ready to strike.
They're also adjustable. So for women, it's a choice because it's something they feel safe and secure behind.
They didn't just reintroduce the AR-15, they marketed it like never before. Gun companies started pushing the AR-15 as more than just a rifle. It was a lifestyle, a symbol of freedom and independence. Suddenly, this wasn't just a gun for hobbyists or hunters, it was the gun for anyone who wanted to feel empowered, protected, and prepared. And here's where things really take off. Thanks to some incredibly smart marketing, the AR-15 didn't just re-enter the market, it dominated it. By 2020, there were more than 19 million AR-15 style rifles in civilian hands. So why did it blow up? One word: customization. The AR-15 is a rifle that can be adapted to almost any situation. Want a short barrel for home defense? Swap it out. Prefer a longer barrel for hunting or target shooting? You can do that too. It's like a Lego set for gun owners. People could build the exact rifle they needed. This kind of flexibility wasn't just useful, it was a selling point. Manufacturers knew they were giving buyers the ultimate tool for personalization, and they leaned hard into that. High efficiency production methods, how factories produce millions of AR-15s. So here's the real question: how do gun manufacturers keep up with the staggering demand for AR-15s? We're not talking about a few thousand rifles rolling off the production line, we're talking about millions. That's right, millions of AR-15s are produced every year. So what's the secret? The answer lies in the state-of-the-art factories that combine high-tech automation, precision engineering, and a whole lot of efficiency. Let's start with the backbone of modern AR-15 production: CNC machines. These bad boys, computer numerical control machines, are like the brains of the operation. They can take raw materials like aluminum or steel and transform them into precision-cut components with the kind of accuracy humans can only dream of. These machines are running 24/7 in many gun manufacturing plants, cutting barrels, shaping receivers, and milling out the parts that will later come together to form a complete AR-15. Just think about it. An AR-15 is made up of dozens of individual parts, and each of those parts has to be machined perfectly to fit together. A slight error and the entire rifle could malfunction. CNC machines take human error out of the equation, and that's one of the biggest reasons manufacturers can produce such huge quantities with consistency. Here's where things get even more impressive: modularity. One of the most genius aspects of the AR-15 design is that its parts are interchangeable. The upper and lower receivers, the stock stock, the barrel. These components can be swapped and customized to create different variations of the rifle. Manufacturers don't need to produce entirely different rifles for different purposes. Instead, they create a set of core parts that can be assembled in various configurations. This is how companies can offer dozens of models without having to create entirely new production lines for each one. Fun fact, the AR-15's upper and lower receivers, often made from aircraft-grade aluminum, are produced in bulk and assembled later. Some factories can crank out over 1,000 lower receivers in a single day, one of the most essential parts of the rifle structure. But machines can't do it all. There's a human element in this process too. Skilled workers oversee the assembly of these rifles, ensuring that each one is put together with precision.
They use high-powered microscopes, gauges, and other specialized tools. Any flaw, no matter how small, means rejection. These folks have zero tolerance for error. Lives literally depend on their precision.
At many factories, workers are responsible for checking the fit and finish of each part before it's sent off for final assembly. It's a blend of machine efficiency and human quality control, and it's this combination that keeps production moving at breakneck speed. The production line itself is something out of a sci-fi movie. It is a conveyor belt system where different parts of the rifle are assembled at various stages. The parts come together piece by piece, much like how cars are assembled in a modern automotive plant. There's a station for barrel attachment, one for bolt carrier installation, another for stock fitting. Everything moves in perfect synchronization, with the end goal being a fully functional AR-15 ready for testing. And speaking of testing, before any rifle leaves the factory, it has to go through a rigorous quality check. This usually involves test firing the weapon to ensure that everything works smoothly. After all, when you're producing millions of rifles, the last thing you want is a faulty gun hitting the market. And these tests aren't just random. Each and every AR-15 that rolls off the assembly line gets test fired. In some factories, that means firing hundreds of rounds per rifle to check for malfunctions or defects. If a rifle fails the test, it's either fixed or scrapped. That's the level of precision we're talking about here. But production efficiency doesn't stop at the factory doors. The supply chain for AR-15 parts is a massive, well-oiled machine. Some manufacturers rely on international suppliers for key materials like steel and aluminum, while others keep it local, using US-based companies to provide raw materials. Either way, the process is streamlined to ensure that factories always have the parts they need when they need them. No delays, no bottlenecks. The speed at which AR-15s are made is mind-boggling. Some companies can produce a rifle in as little as 2 hours. 2 hours from raw materials to a fully assembled, functional rifle. And considering the demand, that kind of speed isn't just impressive, it's necessary. The numbers speak for themselves. Between all the major manufacturers, Smith & Wesson, Ruger, Daniel Defense, and others, the US gun industry cranks out around 1.5 to 2 million AR-15s each year. That's more than the total number of cars some automakers produce annually. And you will be amazed, one of the biggest producers, Smith & Wesson, has been known to produce up to 500,000 AR-15s in a single year, and that's just one company. Multiply that by all the major manufacturers, and you begin to see just how massive the AR-15 production industry really is. But here's the thing. While production is super efficient, it's not just about the numbers. Manufacturers have a vested interest in making sure that AR-15s are built to last. These rifles aren't just churned out, they're engineered for performance, and every detail matters. So, how do gun manufacturers ensure that their AR-15s meet the high standards expected by customers? It all comes down to precision, process, and people. Factories today are a blend of cutting-edge technology and skilled craftsmanship. It's this marriage of machine and man that allows the industry to produce millions of rifles each year without compromising on quality. Hook. But this isn't just about cranking out rifles for the sake of it. There's another reason the AR-15 has become a household name, and it's not just about the gun itself. It's about the way it's sold, the story behind it, and that's where we turn to next, the marketing machine behind America's most controversial rifle. Aggressive marketing and consumer appeal, the selling of the AR-15. Here's something most people don't know. When gun manufacturers started pushing the AR-15 in the civilian market, they weren't just selling a firearm, they were selling an idea, a symbol. The AR-15 wasn't marketed as just another rifle, it was marketed as the ultimate expression of freedom, protection, and even identity. You ever wonder why the AR-15 became the rifle that millions of Americans wanted in their homes? The answer isn't just about its design or functionality, it's about one of the most effective marketing campaigns in modern history. Let's break it down. Post-2004, after the federal assault weapons ban expired, gun manufacturers saw an opportunity. They knew they couldn't just reintroduce the AR-15 and hope people would buy it. They had to make it desirable in a way no other firearm had ever been. And so, they built a narrative around it. Daniel Defense, one of the biggest AR-15 manufacturers, saw over $1 billion in civilian sales from this rifle alone. They didn't achieve those numbers by accident. They understood that to sell the AR-15, they had to make it feel essential to the American way of life.
And so that makes it very attractive to shooters that want to take this to the range for a number of different reasons, because for lack of a better word, they can play around with it, they can modify it, and they go to the range and they can see other people have done this or that to them and they can talk about it.
But here's the twist. This wasn't just about selling a gun. It was about tying the AR-15 to American values like patriotism, individualism, and even masculinity. Gun ads didn't just show off the AR-15 specs. They showed men standing tall, holding the rifle with an American flag waving in the background. The messaging was crystal clear. If you want to protect your home, your family, your country, this is the rifle you need. Ads from companies like Bushmaster and Smith & Wesson leaned heavily into this, positioning the AR-15 as not just a firearm, but a statement. One of the boldest campaigns came from Bushmaster in 2012. Their "Consider Your Man Card" reissued ad became infamous, equating owning an AR-15 with masculinity. The idea was simple. If you wanted to be a real man, you needed this rifle. The psychological play here was genius. Bushmaster wasn't just selling a gun, they were selling an identity, and this approach worked. That ad campaign didn't just boost sales, it cemented the AR-15 as a cultural symbol of power and independence. But it wasn't just about who they marketed the rifle to, it was about how they did it. Manufacturers knew they couldn't just target hardcore gun enthusiasts. They needed to reach new markets, including first-time buyers and people looking for a reliable self-defense option. This is where the AR-15's modularity became the star of the show. Think of it like this. When gun companies advertised the AR-15, they weren't just saying, "Here's a rifle." They were saying, "Here's a rifle you can make your own." The ability to swap out parts, changing the barrel, stock, grip, optics, allowed gun owners to create a custom rifle tailored to their exact needs.
Because of its ability to easily mix and match parts, AR-15 style rifles have soared in popularity among gun owners and competitive sports shooters. New AR-15s range in price from $500 to more than $2,000.
You can build them from the ground up to your specifics. Like maybe I like this trigger from this company, or I like this stock from this company, or this railing from that company.
Want something for hunting? No problem. Change the setup. Need something for home defense? Adjust the configuration. The AR-15 wasn't just versatile, it was personal, and manufacturers hammered this message home. In 2019, a study showed that nearly 90% of AR-15 owners had modified their rifles with accessories or different parts. That's an insanely high customization rate, and it highlights how deeply manufacturers understood their audience. They weren't just selling a product, they were offering the ultimate customizable experience, and people couldn't get enough of it. This wasn't just about functionality, it was about choice. The message was clear: you are in control, you build it the way you want. It's not just a gun, it's your gun. Gun manufacturers also leaned heavily on the idea of protection. Many of the AR-15 ads showcased scenarios where a homeowner might need to defend their property. With phrases like "defend what's yours," the ads played into very real fears about personal safety, crime, and the uncertainty of the world around us. The message? Owning an AR-15 made you ready for whatever came your way. This angle resonated, especially with people who saw the AR-15 not as an offensive weapon, but as a tool for defense. After all, a rifle that was trusted by soldiers and law enforcement, that had serious credibility for civilian use. But here's where things get controversial. The same tactics that made the AR-15 wildly popular also stirred up significant debate. Critics began to question whether this marketing, especially the focus on power, masculinity, and protection, was contributing to dangerous outcomes. Mass shootings involving AR-15s put the gun and the companies behind it under the microscope. Activists argued that portraying the rifle as a symbol of strength or invincibility might encourage its misuse. The Sandy Hook shooting in 2012, where the gunman used a Bushmaster AR-15, sparked massive backlash. Lawsuits were filed filed against Bushmaster, accusing the company of using irresponsible marketing tactics that glorified violence. While the courts later ruled in favor of the victims' families, it raised an important question. Was the AR-15's rise fueled by a dangerously appealing image of power? Despite the controversies, gun manufacturers pressed on. They knew their audience and they doubled down on marketing that emphasized self-reliance and constitutional rights. The AR-15 wasn't just a rifle, it was portrayed as a symbol of the Second Amendment itself. Ads often referenced freedom, with imagery of American flags and historical references to the Founding Fathers. It wasn't subtle. In one ad, Daniel Defense featured the AR-15 alongside the text, "Defending your rights, defending your freedom." This tied the gun directly to American values, making it about more than just ownership. It became about patriotism. Manufacturers weren't just selling rifles, they were selling a vision of America where owning an AR-15 wasn't just a right, but a responsibility. And this strategy wasn't just successful, it was bulletproof. Even as political pressure mounted for tighter gun control laws, AR-15 sales continued to soar. In fact, anytime there was talk of an AR-15 ban, sales would spike. Manufacturers understood this and used it to their advantage, often hinting that the future of gun ownership was uncertain, encouraging buyers to act before it was too late. During the 2016 election cycle, AR-15 sales skyrocketed as people feared that new regulations might restrict access to the rifle. Manufacturers capitalized on this uncertainty, pushing the idea that owning an AR-15 was a way to safeguard not only your home, but your constitutional rights.
Armed citizenry, as the Founding Fathers urged, is more necessary today than ever for peaceful, loving patriots who are willing and able to step up to defend their family, their neighbors, their community, and their country.
The AR-15 isn't just a product, it's a cultural phenomenon, and gun manufacturers built that piece by piece with some of the most effective and at times controversial marketing strategies the firearms industry has ever seen. But how have these companies navigated the legal minefield surrounding this rifle? With so much debate over gun laws, how do manufacturers keep producing and selling millions of AR-15s without being held back by regulations? Political and legislative landscape. Let's be real, selling millions of AR-15s in America doesn't happen by chance. There's another powerful force at play here, and it's not just the marketing, it's the way manufacturers have mastered navigating the complex web of laws and regulations that surround firearms. The AR-15 has been at the center of some of the most heated political debates in modern US history, but despite calls for tighter controls and outright bans, gun manufacturers have continued to thrive. How? They've become experts in playing the game. How do you keep selling millions of rifles that are so heavily scrutinized? Simple. You learn how to work the system and stay one step ahead of the law. Let's go back to 1994. This is where the AR-15 first hit a major roadblock, the federal assault weapons ban. For a decade, the sale of new AR-15s and other similar firearms was restricted. Gunmakers couldn't sell rifles with certain features, like folding stocks, flash suppressors, or high-capacity magazines. But here's the thing, manufacturers didn't just pack up and call it a day. Instead, they found ways to adapt. During the ban, companies began producing state-compliant versions of the AR-15 by slightly tweaking the design, removing certain features, or changing the magazine capacity. They could legally sell their rifles while staying within the confines of the law. It was a clever workaround that kept the AR-15 in circulation even when the ban was in effect. And this was just the beginning. When the assault weapons ban expired in 2004, it was like the floodgates opened, but manufacturers knew they needed to stay prepared. The political winds could shift at any time, and they had to be ready to pivot whenever new regulations came down the pipeline. Enter the lobbying machine. The gun industry has some of the most powerful lobbyists in Washington, D.C. Organizations like the National Rifle Association, NRA, have played a huge role in shaping gun policy in the US, and gun manufacturers are closely tied to these efforts. Lobbyists work directly with lawmakers to influence gun legislation and ensure that the interests of manufacturers and gun owners are protected. Did you know that the NRA spends millions of dollars every year on lobbying efforts? In 2020 alone, they spent over $2.2 million influencing gun policy, and much of that work is centered around protecting rifles like the AR-15 from stricter regulations. Gun manufacturers don't just rely on lobbying, they also engage in legal battles to protect their products. After the Sandy Hook tragedy, where a Bushmaster AR-15 was used, victims' families filed a lawsuit against Remington, the parent company of Bushmaster. They argued that the way the AR-15 was marketed contributed contributed to the shooting. The case eventually led to a $73 million settlement in 2022, setting a precedent for how gun companies might be held accountable for their marketing practices. But despite this, gun manufacturers haven't backed down. They've continued to produce and sell millions of AR-15s, finding ways to navigate legal challenges without halting production. A key part of their strategy, focusing on state-level laws. While some states like California and New York have implemented their own assault weapon bans or restrictions, others, like Texas and Florida, remain gun-friendly. Manufacturers have become experts in making state-compliant versions of the AR-15 to ensure their rifles can still be sold, even in states with tighter restrictions. For example, California requires AR-15s to have a fixed magazine that can only be removed with a tool, making it harder to reload quickly. Instead of fighting these laws, manufacturers embrace them, tweaking their designs just enough to stay within the law while still selling to consumers. This kind of flexibility has allowed manufacturers to continue selling AR-15s nationwide despite the fragmented legal landscape. They've also been quick to mobilize whenever new laws are proposed. Whenever there's a push for stricter gun control, gun makers use lobbying and public campaigns to push back, framing any potential regulation as a threat to Second Amendment rights. But it's not just federal regulations that manufacturers are watching, they're also keeping a close eye on court cases. One of the most significant legal shields for gun makers is the Protection of Lawful Commerce in the Arms Act, PLCAA, passed in 2005. This law essentially protects gun manufacturers from being held liable if their firearms are used in crimes. It's like an insurance policy for the entire industry, ensuring that gun companies aren't bogged down by endless lawsuits every time their products are misused. Without the PLCAA, the gun industry could have been crippled by lawsuits. This law has been a game changer, allowing AR-15 manufacturers to continue business as usual, even as their products are involved in high-profile shootings. But even with all this protection, gun makers know that the political climate can change at any moment. That's why they've also invested heavily in grassroots efforts to rally public support. Organizations like the NRA aren't just lobbying behind the scenes, they're actively organizing gun owners to push back against any proposed legislation that might restrict AR-15 sales. Gun companies also fund pro-gun advocacy groups, campaigns, and even gun-related events to ensure the public remains engaged and invested in protecting gun rights. Every time there's a new piece of legislation aimed at restricting AR-15s, these groups mobilize their base, encouraging gun owners to contact their representatives, attend rallies, and vote against candidates who support gun control. The result? Despite ongoing debates over gun control, AR-15 production and sales haven't slowed down. Manufacturers have mastered the art of working within the system, navigating laws, leveraging legal protections, and mobilizing their base to ensure that their products remain on the shelves. Expanding the market, reaching new demographics, and modern gun owners. Here's something surprising. The AR-15 isn't just for the traditional gun enthusiast anymore. It's become popular among groups that gun manufacturers never used to target: women, younger buyers, and even people who've never owned a gun before. Manufacturers have found a way to make this rifle appeal to a whole new audience, and it's been one of the smartest moves they've made. So, how did the AR-15 make the leap from a specialized firearm to something that feels like it belongs in almost every American household? It starts with the growing number of female gun owners. For decades, the firearms market was overwhelmingly male, but in the last decade, women have started buying guns in record numbers, and manufacturers quickly adapted. Companies realized they needed to rethink how they marketed the AR-15 if they wanted to tap into this growing demographic. By 2020, the number of women buying AR-15s had surged, with women making up nearly 1 in 5 AR-15 buyers. That's a big leap from just a few years earlier. So how did manufacturers draw women into the AR-15 market? It wasn't just about making the rifle smaller or lighter, though some models were adjusted for ease of use. What really made the difference was a shift in the story manufacturers told. The focus turned toward personal protection. Ads for the AR-15 started showing women taking control of their safety, protecting their homes, and standing strong.
How was that? We have private Facebook pages for all of our chapters, and all the girls ooh and ah over it, and what are you gonna name her? Oh, can you bring it next time? I want to shoot it. So yeah, there is a little bit of a status when you get a new gun of any kind, but right now rifles are very hot.
The AR-15 wasn't positioned as a macho gun for aggressive tactics anymore. It became a symbol of empowerment. Manufacturers weren't just selling a gun, they were selling confidence, security, and independence, all wrapped up in a rifle that could do it all. But the appeal didn't stop with women. Younger buyers, millennials, millennials and Gen Z became another key target. And this shift wasn't just about numbers, it was about understanding what these younger generations cared about. For millennials and Gen Z, owning an AR-15 wasn't just about self-defense, it was about customization and making the gun their own. These generations grew up in a world where personalization is everything. Manufacturers understood this and started emphasizing the AR-15's modularity, offering an array of accessories and aftermarket parts that could turn a standard rifle into a personalized tool. Gun companies shifted their marketing to platforms where younger generations spend most of their time: social media and online communities. Companies now partner with influencers on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok, where firearm enthusiasts review, customize, and show off their AR-15s to millions of followers. Fun fact, in 2020, during the height of the pandemic, AR-15 sales skyrocketed by over 40%, with many buyers citing concerns over personal safety as their main reason for purchasing. And as gun manufacturers continue to adapt, the AR-15's reach keeps expanding. They're no longer just catering to gun enthusiasts, they're pulling in new customers from all walks of life, from first-time buyers to seasoned shooters looking for something they can call their own. The future of AR-15 production. So what's coming next for the AR-15? Innovation, technology, and some moves you might not see coming. Let's start with the idea of a smart AR-15. It might sound futuristic, but manufacturers are already looking at ways to integrate smart gun technology into their rifles. Imagine a rifle that only works when the registered owner is holding it, thanks to biometric fingerprint scanners built into the grip.
Anyone else comes up to this gun and tries to fire it, it should not fire, as demonstrated by my alternate hand pulling the trigger. Now I'm going to fire with my fingerprint.
This kind of tech could prevent accidents or theft and could change the conversation around gun safety completely. Companies are exploring how they can use advanced electronics to make their rifles both safer and more reliable without sacrificing the features that make the AR-15 so popular. Fun fact, some manufacturers are already experimenting with things like RFID-enabled safety systems, which allow a gun to be deactivated unless the owner is nearby with a corresponding device. It's the kind of technology that could fundamentally shift how AR-15s are viewed by lawmakers and consumers alike. But that's not all. There's also a huge focus on making the AR-15 even more customizable than it already is. You thought modularity was a big deal before? Well, manufacturers are doubling down on that idea, exploring new ways to make the AR-15 feel even more personal for each user. It's not just about making AR-15s more customizable though. Manufacturers are also working on improving the materials used in production. Lighter, stronger alloys and advanced polymers are being tested to create rifles that are more durable yet easier to handle. The idea is to offer an AR-15 that can stand up to extreme conditions while still being lightweight enough for recreational shooters to enjoy for hours at the range. Some AR-15s are already being made with carbon fiber components, reducing the weight while maintaining the rifle's strength. And then there's the growing market for augmented reality, AR, and virtual reality, VR training systems. Manufacturers are looking at ways to make gun ownership more than just about going to the range. Imagine training with your AR-15 in a virtual environment where you can simulate different scenarios from the comfort of your home. Companies are already partnering with tech firms to create VR platforms that replicate real-world shooting situations, allowing users to hone their skills without ever firing a live round. This isn't just a game, it's the future of training, and it's going to change how people think about owning and using an AR-15. This tech-driven approach to firearm ownership is something gun manufacturers are betting big on. Younger generations in particular are drawn to high-tech solutions, and companies know that the next wave of AR-15 buyers will want more than just a traditional rifle, they'll want an experience. By integrating cutting-edge technology into the ownership and training process, manufacturers are positioning the AR-15 to remain relevant in a world that's becoming increasingly digital.